Mac guys here on Birds 365. Thanks for streaming in on this Football Friday. McMullen and McDonald with you. We're joined by John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation, one of our favorite guests. And I saw you laughing. He's still smiling. Getting ready to come on and talk about the list that he put out last week with the quarterbacks rankings in the NFC. First things first, I got to ask you, did you write the headline or did someone else?
I wrote the headline, which is why I'm surprised this was even
it's undisputed. Totally perfect.
Totally perfect, unchallengeable ranking of NFC quarterbacks. So yeah, I'm amazed it was a topic of conversation.
That's what makes it great, is the headline. And yes, I'm going to go quickly through this for everybody who's not on Bleeding Green Nation right now, and then we'll delve into it. His rankings have Jalen Hurts number 1, which should make every Eagle fan on the planet happy. Jared Goff 2, Dak Prescott 3, Derek Carr 4 coming over to the NFC. Geno Smith 5, Justin Fields 6, Daniel Jones 7, Matthew Stafford 8, Brock Purdy 9. Oh, we'll talk about Brock. Kirk Cousins 10. Oh, we'll talk about Kirk. Kyler Murray 11, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett. Good for Jacoby. Shows up and he's already in the top 13. Desmond Ridder, Jordan Love, Taylor Heineke, Cooper Rush. We're now into the backups. Marcus Mariota, Sam Howell. Oh, where's Ed Kratz when you need him? He'll be pissed off. That
Sam's number 1
at number 19. Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Baker Mayfield. Take that, Buccaneer fans. Baker Mayfield at number 22. And oh, by the way, the Eagles and Bucs do play this year. Tyrod Taylor, Colt McCoy / David Blau, Nick Mullins, 25. He's got to be like 50. He's got to be the 50th best quarterback in the NFC. Drew Lock, Nate Sudfeld. How about Nate? The unstoppable Nate Sudfeld. I guess he's stoppable since he's at number 27. And Kyle Trask at 28. We got to give you credit here, big guy. That's just fun stuff. And yeah, we got into it last week and debated the snot out of it. Other than hearing McMullen and McDonald screaming about it, you get any other feedback on it?
Well, I actually had Ed on the show last week for my Eye on the Enemy podcast, and we did our own snake draft, and he did have a couple of things different. He had Baker Mayfield way up higher on his list, and like you mentioned, he had Sam Howell higher on his list than I have on mine. But yeah, Ed and I had a good time talking about this list last week.
Our buddy Clay Harbor, by the way, did his list, and I love Clay to death. And but Clay is very loyal to the Eagles, to the Jags because he played with them. And to Chicago because he grew up in Chicago. He's a big Bears fan. And he had Jalen Hurts number 1, which I think we all do. And by the way, that's the story. Like, we don't even debate that.
No, just move on from that. He's number 1. Get everything else.
It's amazing where we've come in 12 months with Jalen Hurts. There's no debate.
And how big is the gap between Hurts and number 2? That's the other thing.
I was thinking about, Jody asked me when he started, by the way, Clay, sorry, he had Justin Fields number 2, which, I mean, come on. I mean, maybe I like Justin a lot. I'm not putting him nobody likes Justin Fields more than Jody. I'm like, maybe for the ceiling, maybe down the road, maybe all that stuff. But I love Clay, but come on, buddy. But Jody brought this up, and I was like, he hit me because I had not seen it just on the show. And I was trying to think of who number 2 was. And I forgot Dak Prescott, but I think there's a group. Dak should be number 2 in my estimation. But nonetheless, there's a group that are sort of like the same. Jared Goff, for the most part, I love your picks, except, and this is where Jody, if Brock Purdy above Kirk Cousins and Kyler Murray. I mean, what are we doing? That's what I said. What are we doing here? I mean, you're talking just what I said with Clay. I mean, that is a big projection, John. That is a big projection. Right behind him is a 4-time Pro Bowl quarterback. Right behind him is a former Rookie of the Year. Granted, he's coming off injury. I know the issues, and he doesn't study and this and that, but he's got a lot of talent. And if you watch San Francisco and you watch Brock Purdy win 6 games, all the credit in the world, did a tremendous job. But Kyle was masking a lot of deficiencies. I mean, he was dressing that thing up. Those guys are big-time quarterbacks if they're right. That was my only issue with your list.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think Brock Purdy, there certainly is not a large sample size there, certainly much smaller than Kirk Cousins. And I think one of the things I was looking at is most of what I was thinking about was projecting to 2023. And my thoughts on Kirk Cousins is that I think at a certain point here, he's going to be 35 this year, Kirk Cousins. I think we're going to start to see maybe the downslope for Kirk a little bit, but I couldn't put Kirk ahead of two quarterbacks who did more in the playoffs last year than he was able to do. Daniel Jones beat Kirk Cousins straight up in their postseason matchup. And I think Daniel Jones's future in 2023 is brighter than Kirk Cousins' future in 2023. And I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy. I have Brock Purdy on the list ahead of Kirk Cousins because Brock Purdy won 2 playoff games with San Francisco last year. And I hear what you're saying. Kyle certainly does help him out, but he also had a 107.3 passer rating in his 5 regular season starts. He had a 13-4 touchdown to interception ratio in those 5 starts. And I think that we saw enough from Brock Purdy in his brief time with San Francisco to think like there is some talent here. I think when I put these rankings together, I think I did so with the understanding and hopefully with everyone else's understanding that when you're at this point in the list, it's really close between all these different guys. I have no argument if you have Kyler Murray ahead of Brock Purdy or Kirk Cousins. I think Kyler Murray is an enigma. I think Kyler Murray certainly could be much higher on this list. I don't think Kyler Murray has proved nearly as much in his brief career that Brock Purdy has in the 7 games, the 8 games that he's played, but the 7 full games that he's played so far, which is why if I'm starting a team, I don't know that I trust Kyler Murray. And I would think at this moment, I might trust Brock Purdy a little bit more than I do Kyler Murray because I've seen Purdy have a little bit more success. Maybe some of that is coaching. I don't know. But Kyler Murray hasn't won anything in the NFL so far. And there are all these question marks surrounding his mentality and off the field stuff. So that was my reasoning for having Purdy where he is ahead of Cousins and Murray. But it's really, really close when you get down to this point in the list.
All right, quick follow-up because I know Jody wants to jump in. I'll give you your time, Jody, but just one quick follow-up. Do we put too much emphasis on playoff wins for quarterbacks? And I say this because I look at that Giants-Vikings playoff game, and it was a mini Super Bowl, certainly not the same stage. But Daniel Jones was great in that game because he was playing against one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. And the best quarterback on the field was on the other team, but everybody forgets it because the Vikings lost the game. He was like 80% completion. He was 31 of 39. He's throwing the football all over the field. The Giants go right down the field. He comes right back. The guy had 7 fourth-quarter comebacks last year. The guy came back from the largest deficit in NFL history last year. And he would have won by double digits if it wasn't for Jalen Reagor, our old buddy, dropping footballs and not running routes. He came back from 17 down in Buffalo against in Buffalo. Now, he had help from Justin Jefferson, no doubt about it. But, man, I mean, just on the Super Bowl, the reason I compare it to the Super Bowl is Patrick Mahomes was great, but Jalen Hurts was better on that day, and he lost the game. So do we put too much emphasis on quarterbacks? They have to win that playoff game. If you're against a team who's better, you might lose the game, and it might not be your fault.
No, I think that's fair, and I think Kirk Cousins did have a good year statistically last year, but I also do look at his history in big games and in the playoffs, and he rarely comes through in those situations. And I think we looked at Minnesota's record last year's being much better than the actual level at which they played. I think as I'm just looking, and a part of it is that as I'm looking ahead, I think I see Minnesota's offense taking a dip this year, and which quarterback do I want kind of moving forward? I think I don't want Kirk Cousins moving forward more than I want Purdy or Daniel Jones moving forward. But again, it's really close. But to your point, I think you're right. We do tend to overvalue playoff wins for quarterbacks. That was a part of my reasoning for having those guys ahead of Kirk Cousins.
And my biggest question was, why do you have Brock Purdy down at number 9? John has, why do you have him all the way up at number 9?
Jody wants to
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're better than Daniel Jones. You're projecting forward to next year. If we're taking the injury out of it, that we don't know when he's coming back. He may be ready by week 1. He might not be ready till December. We don't really know. off what he did last year. I got him ahead of Daniel Jones. I got him projected for his career and this upcoming season better than Daniel Jones. I think people are woefully understating how well he actually played once he took over for the 49ers. How much of your decision-making in slotting these guys in was projection specifically for next year?
I couldn't put a real percentage on it, but I think it was probably, I would say I was leaning towards making that the strongest point, and understanding that there are players around him and where the team is headed, offensive line help with other skill positions. How likely are these guys to be successful? But I think at the end of the day, I was thinking to myself, if I needed a new starting quarterback on the Eagles, given the roster, who would I want? Who would I take? What order would I take these guys in? And I think that's how it kind of was laid out. So it's mostly, I think, projection, not based on things that they had done throughout the course of their career, although certainly that gives you a good sense of what might be to come. History sometimes is a prelude to what is to come in the future. And so, so I think it was mostly projection and mostly looking at 2023 specifically, where these guys are right now, but definitely with a slight bit of projection, because otherwise you don't have I wouldn't have had Justin Fields up at number 3. Justin Fields didn't do anything really throwing the football last year, but he'll have more talent this year around him. He'll have another year with the coaching staff, and he improved as the year went on. So it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. Justin, now that we beat you up, I'm gonna prop you up, John. Gonna give you the compliment sandwich.
Oh, I had him at 6, didn't I? Yeah,
6.
I had him at 6.
You had him at 6,
yeah.
which I'm fine with that. He's got a lot of potential. Jody thinks I don't like him, but I love him. I hate the organization. I hate this situation.
I know you like him. I think you are overly critical of the organization. They took a step backwards. I'll wait to see if they take steps forward this year.
I'm concerned about
declining that possibility.
I'm concerned about the situation. I think he's in a bad situation. But one I was debating heavily, and I think now I've shifted to where you are. Who's the second best quarterback in the NFC? And I said, after Jody reminded me, I forgot about Dak Prescott. I put Dak at number 2. But I think Jared Goff is the second best quarterback in the NFC. I think he's so underrated. He had a lot of struggles when he first went to Detroit, his last year with the Rams. But man, he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks. He really has that, if you go back to that number 1 overall pick, the ability to fit the ball in tight windows. If you put him in good situations, he's sort of same as Cousins, but with a better arm talent, which is strange to say. If you put him in good situations, he's difficult to deal with. I think he might be the most underrated quarterback in football, Jared Goff.
Yeah, and Detroit has really loaded up the offense around him. They've given him so many weapons. The play calling there, he's got a brilliant play caller and offensive staff in Detroit, and he was really good with the Rams before things fell apart.
Yeah.
In that Super Bowl season, he was outstanding. He was outstanding the year in 2017 when they came up short against the Eagles, and they were an ascending team at that point, but they hadn't reached the Super Bowl by that point. He was, and I think part of, as Philadelphia fans, we think about Jared Goff as being quote unquote not as good as Carson Wentz, because that was the debate for the first few years of their careers. Jared Goff taking number 1, Carson Wentz taking number 2. Oh, thank goodness the Rams picked Jared Goff because we got Carson Wentz out of that deal. And for a few years there, it certainly looked like that would be the narrative that holds. Now, fast forward here to 2023, Jared Goff is the guy you want. And I think when you're picking between him and Dak Prescott misses more time. And Dak Prescott last year, for whatever reason, was reckless with the football. I think Dak Prescott is maybe overall purely more talented, perhaps, but it's close. And Jared Goff showed more consistency last year. I think this is the perfect offense for him. He has all the tools to succeed, and I think he's got a better coaching staff around him, which is why I had him at number 2.
And a lot of quote unquote wise guys like the Lions, the team, they can jump up and be a big factor in the NFC next year. Jameson Williams didn't play till December last year. It might have been late November, but their first round draft pick, they knew they were basically redshirting. And if he reaches the levels that were expected of him and his draft status, that's just another weapon for the Lions this year. Yeah, their offense is going to be real good this upcoming year. All right. I'm not a Buck fan, never been a Buck fan, don't want to even pretend to be a Buck fan. But I got to ask, Baker Mayfield buried 28th and last Kyle Trask on the list, and you laugh in Kyle Trask's face. How bad are the Bucs going to be without Brady this year, Mr. Stolnis?
They could be real bad. I know Baker Mayfield had a good game with the Rams last year with that big comeback. But I was looking when I was putting this list together, I was like, let me go pull up Baker Mayfield's Pro Football Reference page and let's take a look at these numbers. And the numbers are awful. He's been a mediocre to below average quarterback his entire career. He's had some moments, he's had some stretches where he's played pretty well, but he's a backup. He is a backup in this league, and Tampa Bay is going to be relying on him as their starter. Now, maybe there's a Geno Smith-like resurgence for him where he finally figures it out here at this stage in his career. But I think Baker Mayfield has had opportunities. He's had talent. He's had good players around him and has not been able to make the leap and establish himself as a viable starting quarterback in the NFL. He's a guy that if you need somebody for 4 or 5 weeks to fill in for the starting quarterback, maybe he'll win you 2 or 3 of those games. And that's kind of what you want out of your backup quarterback. Just don't kill us. But he is not a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, not for a team that wants to actually do anything. And I was really I was startled by how bad his numbers were. He has never had an above average season throwing the football in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. He had the one good season, I don't know, second or third season, where they won 11 games, maybe something like 10, 11 games. And Cleveland had been bad for a long time. So I said, well, that's impressive in Cleveland at the time to make that turnaround. But he just hasn't progressed since then. And that's disappointing. That's one thing about, I always say player development is real. We've seen it with certain quarterbacks, most notably here in Philadelphia. And we haven't seen it. Baker's one who's gone backwards after the big season. So he has been a bit of a disappointment. Tampa doesn't look good on paper. And the NFC as a whole doesn't look good on paper because, as you mentioned, John, the chasm between 1 and 2, whoever you want to go with, and there's a group, you can make a case for Dak Prescott. You can make a case we just made a case for Jared Goff. You can make a case for Cousins. You can make a case for Derek Carr coming over. But there is a big gap. And it is amazing, as I said, where we've come in 12 months. Now, are we being too deferential to Jalen Hurts? Because there is, and we've talked about this amongst the B guys. Typically, it's very rare when you see a player get better, and there's no hiccup along the way. We just talked about one Baker going the opposite way. Can he continue at this level, Jalen Hurts?
I mean, I don't know how much better he can get than he was last year. If there's a ceiling above where he was last year, then we have a very good situation on our hands. I think he can be at least as good as he was last year moving forward. And I don't think we were asking this question about Carson Wentz after his first 2 seasons when he had a very solid. I thought if you look back at Carson Wentz's rookie season, it was not all that dissimilar from Jalen Hurts' rookie season. Jalen Hurts got to the playoffs in really his first year starting, his second season in the league. And Carson Wentz really helped the Eagles improve in Doug Peterson's first season, but they were not a playoff team. But I thought both guys were similarly productive, albeit in different ways. Jalen Hurts running the football more than Carson Wentz as a thrower. Second year, both guys took a leap as starting quarterbacks, and both guys really, Carson Wentz was going to get that team to the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts got his team to the Super Bowl. Both were MVP candidates, really probably should have won, or you could make the argument that both could have won in their second year. And I think maybe watching Carson Wentz fall apart, the injuries got to Carson Wentz, and I think that was the main catalyst for the reasons he kind of fell down and was not as productive in 18 and 19, and certainly in 2020 after that. Jalen Hurts, thankfully, has not dealt with an injury like that. And I think his performance in the Super Bowl, to me, was something that cemented him as a guy that to rely on moving forward. To be able to play that well in the biggest stage after having 2 playoff games, which, let's face it, were not all world. He was fine. He was good. And the Eagles won those games comfortably. They needed every yard of what Jalen Hurts did in that Super Bowl in order to even stay in that game. And for him to play as well as he did in that situation shows you that the moment is never going to be too big for this guy. And so as long as he continues to work hard and prepare, which I think we all believe he will do, you see the talent there. And then there's that intangible that sometimes holds quarterbacks back. I don't think that's going to be a problem for Jalen Hurts. I think he can continue to play as well as he has moving forward, which is why I don't have those questions. The Super Bowl really did it for me.
John, it's been a couple of weeks since we had you on, and the Eagles have made moves, free agent signings, lottery tickets, call them what you want. I used the phrase bargain basement earlier. Howie Roseman has done what he's had to do to fill in some of the blanks on the team leading up to the draft. They haven't spent even good money, forget about big money, good money on any of the free agents that they brought in.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that jumps out at you either positively or negatively, like even at the minimum, I don't know why the Eagles would add a player like this, or, hey, they got this guy just above the minimum. I can see him starting field. I can see him playing. Which of Howie's off-season free agent acquisitions do you think is the best bet or the worst bet?
Well, I think the best bet is Rashad Penny, because I think we've seen he has the ability to be a really effective running back, and of course the question is health with this guy. Can he stay on the field? The way the Eagles will want to use him, I think, will limit his exposure to injury. I mean, he's not going to get 25 carries a game. He's not going to be the workhorse running back. And I think we saw Kenny Gainwell come on last year. So I think they're going to rely on those 2 guys. And I wouldn't rule out them. I think Howie Roseman in the draft is going to move around quite a bit and get some extra picks. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see them adding a 2nd or 3rd round running back in this draft if they're able to get some additional picks in the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds or whatever. So I like the Rashad Penny pick. I think that has the potential to be a very impactful signing for not a lot of money this offseason. I think some of the other guys, I like the idea of going after guys who were drafted high, showed a lot of promise, and really the main reason for their stumbles have been some injury issues. To bank on those guys that if they're healthy, they can match a certain level of play, I think is a smart way to build a team when you have to consider cap possibilities. And so, I like the idea of going after for Nicholas Morrow. I think, is he as good as TJ Edwards? I would rather have TJ Edwards than Morrow, but I think you can see a scenario where he gives you some solid production at that linebacker spot. I think Terrell Edmonds could be a guy who, again, you've seen can play a little bit in this new scheme with Sean Desai. We don't know how he's going to use some of these guys, but can he be a guy that is able to kind of get over his injury issues and step up? And Greedy Williams, I like as a 4th cornerback kind of guy, a guy who can jump in case Darius Slay or James Bradbury gets hurt. I think he again has the thing is, you're not relying on these guys to be superstars, and you hopefully have enough stars at some of these other spots that you can fill in with some draft picks coming up in the next month. And there will be guys who shake out. There will be more guys who get released, who become available, that I don't think Howie Roseman has done adding impactful guys. And those guys you'll be able to get on the cheap as well. So I think right now these are kind of just giving you some stability in terms of your depth chart, and with keeping an eye open for potential upgrades as they come out. These guys that he's added, not all of them are going to make the opening week roster, I don't think. Some of these guys will get cut in training camp. They're here for a moment. But to answer your question, I think Penny is probably the best bet.
Nice.
At John Stolnis on Twitter. Follow John there. You can read him at bleedinggreennation.com. I'm sure you're going to watch some baseball 24 hours late today at some point, The Good Fight. Listen to his podcast. And you had Ed Kratz on. Your football podcast, Eye on the Enemy, our buddy Ed Kratz. So make sure you listen to John on all those platforms. I will end it here. We'll end it with the draft and impactful players because the Eagles have a chance to add an impactful player at number 10 overall. If for some strange reason Jalen Carter falls and the Eagles have cleared him from a due diligence perspective of any off-the-field issues, do you even think about anybody else? Is there anybody else in the conversation for you at number 10 overall in that scenario?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we still see that that's a big need for this team because I don't think Jordan Davis is going to be a pass rushing house wrecker like Jalen Carter would be. I think you're hoping that Jordan Davis can develop that part of his game, but you're really looking for him to be a run stuffer for you and to create havoc for his teammates on the offensive line and to create double teams. And so I think pairing him with Jordan Davis would be monstrous and would certainly cushion the blow of losing Javon Hargrave. We know with this team defense, that working on the lines is everything for Howie Roseman. So whether it's getting an edge rusher at number 10 or Jalen Carter, I think if Jalen Carter's there, and like you said, they've done their due diligence on his off the field stuff, I think they absolutely should go after him. I think, adding somebody, if they're available, like a Christian Gonzalez at cornerback makes a lot of sense because of the age of Darius Slay and James Bradbury. He might not play a whole lot here in 2023. If you have an edge rusher, if Jalen Carter's gone and you're going to stay at number 10, I could certainly see an edge rusher. I think the argument that has made a lot more sense for me over these last few weeks is upgrading on the offensive line at number 10. And I think one of the reasons to do that is it doesn't sound as though they're ready to just hand Cam Jurgens the starting right guard job. So it looks as though there's a possibility they could draft a guy here at number 10, put him in at right guard, and just continue to groom Cam Jurgens as the eventual Jason Kelce replacement. It's also with the idea in mind that at some point you're going to need to move on from Lane Johnson. You're going to need to move on from some of the other guys they have on the offensive line as they're getting older. Although I know Lane just signed the extension. So this team never drafts with the current year in mind. And so it makes it really hard to figure out exactly where Howie Roseman is going to go. And it's also why I think he's going to trade out of 10 and probably trade out of 30. I think he's going to make a lot of moves on draft night because I think he wants to add more picks in the middle of the draft. So unless Jalen Carter is sitting there at 10, if he falls, I think they take him. I think if he gets to 9, they might even move up to go get him to fill that spot. I would not mind that at all.
I did not hear Bijan and all that. No interest in Bijan whatsoever. That high in the draft.
I think Bijan is a good enough running back that I would trade down to get Bijan if I could. Like if I'm moving down to 12 or 13 or something like that, and he's still there, I would take him in that spot. Like if you can see how the board lays out and you can tell like you're going to have a shot if you move down, I would have no problem taking Bijan there because you are in a Super Bowl window right now. And you can probably fill out your 2023 defensive holes with some remaining free agents as the offseason goes along. And getting Bijan Robinson gives you one more weapon for that offense. That this is an offensive league, and it makes you even more unstoppable. I would do that, and I wouldn't think twice about it because I think he is that special. I just don't think that's where the Eagles are going to go.
John Stolnis going out on a limb projecting that Howie Roseman will be active trading, moving up and down. Where did you come up with that? The fact that the Eagles had 3 first-round draft picks last year and picked none of them in that position, that Howie moved every single one of those picks before the actual pick? Yeah, we all agree with you on that one. All right, last one from me. Could be draft-related, might be free agent-related. When the season starts next year, wide receiver 3, if we assume Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown is 1, Devontae Smith is 2. Wide receiver 3 for the Philadelphia Eagles will be who? You can give me just an added wide receiver, the present wide receiver, or a drafted wide receiver. If you want to give me a name, I'll take it. But I won't make you be that finite. But who will be wide receiver 3, either positionally or group-wise, for the Eagles when the season starts?
I think it'll be Quez, and I'm not excited about that prospect. I think if they draft somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round at wide receiver, I don't think they automatically anoint him the number 3. I think that I think they looked at Quez's year, and they're not blind. They see that Quez had a down year. They see that he didn't perform as well. Quez,
by the way, Quez admitted it.
Yeah,
people get upset when we say that. Quez admitted it. He said it himself.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And maybe there's not a lot more there. Maybe this just is the player that he is. Certainly, I don't want to give him a high volume of targets, but I think there were opportunities to add a third wide receiver this offseason if they wanted one. Again, we'll see what players shake out over the course of the summer, which guys get cut. But I think the most realistic expectation would be Quez Watkins comes back as your number 3. When you consider that he really is probably like the fourth option in this offense, I think you should upgrade there if you can. But I don't really see. I don't think it's high on their priority list.
I think it should be, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Always high on our priority list is get John Stolnis on when we can. We do really appreciate your quarterback list because Johnny and I had fun with it last week. And we had a very good time talking about you with us today. We'll certainly get you on before the draft takes place. John, thank you much for hopping in with us today.
Anytime, guys. Thanks.
John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation and the Eye on the Enemy podcast. All right, scraping the bottom of the barrel. He's got Kratz on as a guest. What? Just kidding, Ed. We love Ed Kratz too. All right, McMullen and McDonald hanging with you. Coming up in hour number 2, we got Andrew DeCecco from Inside the Birds who's going to jump in with us. So lots yet to do here on Birds 365.